my friend. I still wanna fly, even though I have seen.
Hi guys, this is Chauncey from Get Music to Know. I'm super thrilled to welcome Paul Spring with us today. He's a multifaceted musician whose work span across folk, classical guitar, and of course, innovative collaboration. So we are so thrilled to have you here today. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, Chauncey.
Yeah, of course. So I actually came across your music maybe 2 weeks or so. It was on my Spotify Weekly. And then that's where I was introduced to Kind of Heaven, which I'm a massive folk fan anyway, but I absolutely love. Like, the album has been on repeat for a long time, or not a long time, but in those span of 2 weeks. I did a bit of research and found that you actually recorded that album live over a span of 2 days, which is mind-blowing. I can't even wrap my head around that. Like, how was it getting all of that creative energy into this album, over such a short time frame?
Man, not to sound lazy, but it was such a relief to just get it done fast. Because the few albums I made before that took really long to finish because I was very obsessive and meticulous over the sounds, and I was making electronic music. And so each album took me, a year to make. And so to just write the songs over a period of a couple months and then go into the studio and record them with a great collaborator, my friend John Nellen.
Oh yeah, he was on drums.
Yeah, he's on drums. He played a little bass too. And it was just such a relief to get it done quickly. Yeah.
Do you find that there's a difference, let's say, with like the live recording environment compared to, let's say, maybe the traditional studio recording setting?
You mean in terms of like recording a song live, like singing live versus doing it track by track?
Maybe in terms of like the environment of like the creative process. Is the creative process maybe a bit different when you're in a live recording environment versus the traditional studio recording environment?
Yeah, it's quite a bit different. And I think, both are great in their own way, but the live recording way is nice because it's less metronomic, like you aren't doing it to a click track or on a grid. And so there's what they call rubato, like the time drags and pushes, and it's more human sounding, which I don't know if most listeners can tell, but you can be more dynamic. You get the sound of a room, and I feel like with like old records from the past, you also get this, at least for me, especially old jazz records, you get this cool representation of acoustic space where it almost seems as though you can hear the musicians looking at each other, interacting with each other, responding to each other. And I think that's pretty special and different than when you multi-track record things over a longer period of time instead of live tracking.
Yeah. So a little anecdote. I actually lived in Dublin, Ireland for 5 years before I moved here to Berlin. So I kind of got a bit into trad music, and listening to Kind of Heaven, there's definitely elements of like the Celtic guitar there. So what piqued your interest, around Celtic Irish music? Was it a particular event or an experience, or have you always been a fan of the music?
Yeah. What were you going to school for in Dublin, by the way? Did you go to Trinity or?
No. I lived there for 5 years. I'm originally from the States. No, I was there working for tech. Nothing.
Oh, okay. There's a lot of that over there.
Yeah.
I love Dublin so much. Did you go to the Cobblestone pub at all?
We went to many pubs. I'm sure we did. Yeah. Bernard Shaw was our favorite. We went there quite a bit, but yeah.
Oh, cool. Cobblestone has great trad sessions 7 days a week. That's where that band Lankum got their start too. I like them a lot. Irish music, it's funny. I grew up with parents who played pretty much exclusively classical music and Irish music. The only songwriters they really played were, like Cat Stevens, John Denver maybe. So, and I thought I really didn't like any of that music growing up, especially the classical and the Irish. I just thought it was so annoying.
Yeah.
And my dad taught at university. He taught a study abroad group in Galway when I was in like 7th grade. And that's when I started really learning guitar seriously when I was over there. So I started to kind of open my ears to Irish music. this crazy thing happened. I was studying in Rome. I did like classics in college, and these Irish musicians came to play at my college, and they were a super fun hang. Like we ended up staying up all night and drinking. It's a flute player and a bouzouki player. We like climbed up this pomegranate tree and we're having like a blast. And it was such a fun night, and I dug the music, and then I never thought about it again. And then, sorry, I'm giving you a really long story here.
No, it's great. It's fine.
But then I was living in Bed-Stuy 10 years later,
Yeah.
not listening to Irish music at all. And I'm walking through Bed-Stuy and I see these two guys playing Irish music. Wait, so I was 20 and then I was 30. Yeah, so 10 years later, walking through Bed-Stuy, I look in this pub and I see the two Irish musicians who I hung out with in Rome 10 years prior.
Years prior. Wow. Okay.
And I walk in and I'm like, and I remembered one of their names, but I didn't remember the other. And they recognized me, and it was just like, holy crap, this is crazy. And then I was listening to the music they're playing. They're such good players. Their names are Dan Lowry and Alan Murray. I was just blown away. I'm like, this music goes so hard. And so I asked the flute player if he would give me some Irish flute lessons, and I've just been obsessed ever since. I've been so into Irish music. I feel like I've reconnected with it. My last few albums have a lot of tune-inspired songs, and I even did a tour over in Ireland a couple of years ago. I visited my cousins and stuff. I feel very connected to that music.
So you're part Irish?
My brother did the DNA test, and I am 99% Irish.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
Yeah, I'm fully there.
So speaking of the Celtic guitar, so with this album, Kind of Heaven, how do you approach the blending of the sounds on the album? Because there's a lot. You have the Celtic guitar, then you have acoustic ballads, and there's a bit of like the Bach-inspired like counterparts. How do you get all of this together?
Well, first of all, thank you for listening so closely.
Yeah, of course.
And for thinking about it, because this is the first interview I've done about this album. It's just crazy. I didn't really know many people were listening to it. So this is cool for me. I love talking about myself. Yeah, nerding out because I mostly spend time by myself. How do I go about blending it all? That's a good question, because sometimes it feels kind of extra to be taking Bach counterpoint and like Irish trad and singing over it. It just feels like kind of like a little bit too much, like doing the most. I mean, I tried to do it as tastefully as I can. So for example, that song Far From the Flame, the melody and the chords are based on this harp tune called King of the Fairies.
Oh, okay.
And that tune, can be like a lot of Irish tunes can be played really, really quickly. And that song was really fast, and it's a jig, so it's in 3/4.
Yep.
And the original version of that song was in 3/4, and it was really fast. And it definitely sounded ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like it's yeah da 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 da. I'm like, I cannot be singing like this. And so I turned it into 4/4, and I just slowed it way down. And then I got in the studio with John, and I played it for him that day. And he's like, you're still playing it too fast. Slow it down even more. And that's how it ended up, how it is. Yeah, it takes a lot of, I guess the answer is it just takes a lot of like trial and error and experimenting to get that sort of synthesis of different styles to work in a way that is palatable.
Yep, makes sense. And then I was also curious about the name of the album, like Kind of Heaven. What does the name signify to you, and how does that tie into, let's say, maybe like the message or the theme in the album?
Yeah, so have you heard the Lana Del Rey cover of Country Roads, the John Denver song?
Probably. I love Lana. So I probably heard it at some point.
Another thing, like I was talking about how I thought, like growing up, I thought John Denver, I wanted to kill John Denver. And then he actually died, so I shouldn't say that, but I hated him so much. And then I heard that Lana Del Rey cover of Country Roads, and oh my God, this song is perfect. It's like a perfectly written song. It's not some TikTok bait or something. It's like beautiful melody. And the first line of that song is Almost Heaven, West Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
And I just thought that was such a cool first 2 words to a song. And I started singing, and the only words I can sing we're almost heaven, almost heaven, almost heaven. I was just thinking about that idea of how close you can get to that feeling.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I can't just rip off John Denver. So I started singing Kind of Heaven. And that's how that first song, well, it's not the first song on the album, but the first song I wrote for the album, Eye to Eye, that's how that song begins. And so since I was so obsessed with that lyric, that's what I made the title, because this album was kind of made from a place of gratitude and joy, even though there's some moodiness on it. Like, I really love my life right now and everything I got going on. Like, don't have much money, but who does anyways?
Was there like maybe a particular track on the album that feels the most, like maybe the most personal, or like really tugs at your heartstrings?
I think Far From the Flame. It's the one that feels like what I set out to accomplish, I accomplish.
Yeah.
It feels complete in a way that a lot of times when I finish a song, it never feels done. But that's the type of song, maybe because it's based on an Irish melody. It feels like a type of song that is sturdy and finished and can stand on its own. When I went to Ireland 2 years ago, I hung out with my cousins, Patrick and Michael. They're older guys. Patrick actually just passed away a few months ago, which is really sad. But they have so many songs memorized.
Yeah.
And music culture over there, like when you go to a sing song, people just sit around, there's no TVs or anything, and people just sing songs into the air a cappella. And they aren't just singing Irish songs. Like, my cousin was singing Prince and Nirvana and Stevie Wonder and Alone Again Naturally, like, and being around him in his living room, they smoke inside, and there's like a picture of Marilyn Monroe above the fireplace, and he and his brother were just taking turns singing songs, and I would sing songs, and it just made me think a lot about how sturdy a song is.
Yeah.
And how really the melody and the repetition and the structure of the song makes you able to sing it in that setting. It got to the point where we were singing where my cousin said, all right, now sing us one of the songs you've written, Paul. I'm like, damn, I don't know if I can sing any that hold up to all these other songs we've singing. And I got super self-conscious, and I'm like, I need to get better, and I need to write a song where if I'm hanging out with a bunch of old Irish guys,
You just
I
have
could-
your back pocket.
yeah, exactly. And Far From the Flame, I think, is one where even though I can't hang out with Patrick again, unfortunately, I feel like maybe when I see Michael, when I go back over there, I could sing that and he'd say, well, that's all right.
Yeah. I also discovered that you did something really cool. So I grew up in Arizona, so like I'm a mountain and lake girl. Like I love being outdoors, love being in nature. And then I saw that you do something called river canoe tours, which is the coolest thing I think I've ever heard of. Like, it's so cool. I have no idea how one even comes up with this idea. Do you think you'll actually do a river tour maybe for Kind of Heaven? You did one for did you do one in conjunction with the last album?
Yeah, I did one. Where in Arizona are you from, by the way? I was just out there.
I don't know if I grew up in Chandler, Arizona.
I love Arizona, though. I love Sedona, and I was in like the Four Corners area, and I went to Monument Valley and
Nice.
all throughout like Navajo Nation. It's the sunsets out there, you just can't beat them. Yeah, so the first river tour I did was in 2015. So I was a canoe guide in Minnesota, where I'm from.
Oh,
up in
okay.
the Boundary Waters. So for a couple summers, I was like a backcountry wilderness guide. And my friend Sam had just gotten back from overseas. The job he had over there in Germany, they sent his car to St. Louis. And he was my best friend from high school. He is an accordion player. And he's like, it's kind of his idea. He wanted to do a big journey. And he's like, let's canoe down the Mississippi. And I was down. So
Nice.
I booked, I think, 10 shows. And that trip took 48 days. And it was like 1,100 or 1,200 miles. We went from the source to St. Louis. And we were playing songs from my album, Towards the Center. And that was a trip of a lifetime. It was so fun. Yeah, so I wanted to do it again. And I did it again last year. And I went down the Hudson River with my partner, Sophia, and my friend Tom. And that only took 10 days, which was a lot easier.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure if I'll do a river tour for Kind of Heaven, because I actually just did, the reason I was in Arizona, I did a 3-month long tour this fall
Oh,
for
good.
Kind of Heaven, where I did the whole West Coast and stuff. So I did a more traditional driving in a car, playing shows tour for Kind of Heaven. Definitely want to do a river tour again. I'm thinking Delaware next.
Oh, that would be nice.
Do you think you're allowed to do that in Europe? Like canoe between countries?
I mean, if you can do it back home, I'm sure you can do it here.
Yeah.
Maybe. But one thing I realized is that, so your last album, I think that came out around May, River Flows Two Ways.
Mm-hmm.
That title album, I think there was also a track on this album that was called River Flows Two Ways. Was that intentional?
Kind of got that idea because I love Led Zeppelin,
Nice.
and they have that album, Houses of the Holy, but they also have a song on the album before called Houses of the Holy. And that was just always funny to me. Like, how come the song Houses of the Holy isn't on the album Houses of the Holy? Yeah, so that River album is just a bunch of acoustic versions of songs from my past.
Yeah.
And then while I was actually on the water, I wrote that song. And so it was kind of too late to put it on the album.
Yeah.
But I just put it on the next one.
Yeah, I tried to play detective and went back through your other albums, and I was like, is there a correlation? Is there another album name that's here? And I couldn't find it. So I was like, okay. No.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just curious, I know you have extensive background with playing guitar, and you're classically trained. When did you know that playing the guitar and music was your passion? When did this passion ignite within you?
That's a good, so much so that I wanted to do it for a living, maybe.
Yeah.
That's been a bit of a battle, honestly, but I would say I've always struggled because it's a hard way to make a living. And so I've almost always had jobs on the side. I mean, I still do now even. New York is expensive. I don't know if Berlin is expensive, but New York, you got to have side hustles because music doesn't make much. But I put all the free time I have and as much of the day as I have into music because I love it so much.
Yeah.
And without getting too I love it because it's fun, but also to get a little bit self-helpy, I struggle pretty intensely with anxiety and depression. I'm doing really, really well right now the past couple of years, but for a long time, basically the entirety of my 20s, music was how I processed everything. If I was struggling with something, I could write a song and figure it out a little bit. Yeah, so I guess music has always been necessary for me. A lot of the spark to write songs comes from the fact that I figured out it actually is an outlet and a way for me to problem solve. And now I'm at the point where I'm in a much better place. And so it's I have all this practice writing it, and now it can become, for the majority of the time, more of just a really fun, exciting thing to do and a way to explore.
Yeah. I feel like music, I used to do music as well. It's a nice stream of consciousness as well, where you can just let everything go without there being any restrictions and without having to filter what you're thinking or what you want to say. So it's the best.
Yeah.
Best, yeah.
Yeah, to get into that flow state is what they call it, I guess, where during the pandemic is when I started learning to play Bach, and it's nuts when you're learning something that's a little bit too difficult for you and you have to completely focus on it. 8 hours will go by in the space of 10 seconds, and you'll look up and it'll be dark outside and you'll think what just happened?
Yeah. Exactly.
What instrument did you play?
I was classically trained in viola and violin growing up when I was a kid. Yeah.
Cool.
Tried to switch me over to cello and I couldn't read clef when I was for some reason my brain just didn't work that way when I was a child. I was like, I can't do this. It's too why are all the notes lower? I don't understand what's happening. It just didn't work. But so I guess I only have one more question, and it's for first-time listeners or listeners in general. What do you hope they take away from listening to Kind of Heaven?
Well, I would love if, like you did, I would love if they could maybe hear and recognize the musical influences coming into it, the Irish and the classical, because I think one of my goals is that I love those two types of music so much, but even myself, I thought they were so annoying and corny when I was younger.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people, and maybe you'd agree with this, they hear classical music and they think it's uppity or elitist or something. and boring. But I think that's doing yourself a real disservice to just like shut out this type of music. I know I did it myself. And so I hope, even though this is like a indie folk album, I hope maybe it makes people think, oh, I want to check out Bach, or I want to check out some Irish trad, you know, because maybe it will be a sort of chill gateway for people to get into that music.
Yeah.
That'd be cool.
Yeah. Perfect. I mean, well, those are all the questions I had. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really enjoyed the conversation, and I mean, I think it's apparent that I love the album, so.
Thank you, Chauncey.
Yeah, of course.
Thanks for all those great questions.
Yeah, of
Really
course.
thoughtful.
No problem. All right, well, leave you to it. Again, I really want your sweatshirt, but yeah, anyway, have a good rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.
Always winning, never rolls the dice. There's no challenge from the men upstairs. Something tells me